Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast here to tell you about Michelob Ultra Courtside. It's getting fans closer to the NBA with a chance to win prizes like courtside seats, a trip to All-Star Weekend, and much more. Check it out at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access, Courtside 24-25 sweepstakes, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins on October 1st, 2024, ends July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We hear a lot about relationship red flags. I've even talked quite a bit about them on this podcast. They're things to avoid in our friends, partners, or even in ourselves. But what about the green flags? What does a healthy, thriving relationship actually look like? And here's the real question. Are you embodying those green flags yourself? This is where therapy can help. We talk about it all the time on the podcast. Therapy is an incredible tool to identify what healthy relationships look like, to practice positive habits, and work on being your best self. Whether you're navigating a marriage, dating, building friendships, or simply working on your personal growth, therapy helps you form connections that truly love you back. BetterHelp makes starting therapy easy and accessible. It's fully online, so you can work with one of their 30,000 credentialed therapists from the comfort of your own home, and you can switch therapists anytime at no additional cost. It's affordable, convenient, and has already helped over 5 million people worldwide. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/bestofyou today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/bestofyou. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Alison, and I'm so glad you're here to discover what brings out the best of you. This podcast is all about breaking free from painful patterns, mending the past, and discovering our true selves in God. I can't wait to get started as we learn together how to become the best version of who we are with God's help. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Best of You podcast. I'm so thrilled you're here with me this week. For this week's episode, we have a great episode today. I loved this conversation with my dear friend, Aundi Kolber, so I'm so thrilled to get to share it with you today. If you have questions or comments or topics that you'd like me to cover in upcoming episodes of the podcast, I hope you'll leave those for me. You can do that on the Best of You question doc. We'll link to it in the episode show notes as well as on my website over at dralisoncook.com. I've loved hearing from you on that doc as well as through email with comments and notes and topic ideas. The notes of encouragement mean a lot to me too. I've got to tell you, thank you for taking the time to leave those for me. They mean a lot. It really does. Brenda, you wrote to me about the episode on the 12 steps with Ian Morgan Cron, and Julie, you shared a beautiful message for me about the episode with Michael Cusick and what it meant to you. And I just really appreciate it so much. I can't tell you how much it means to hear from you and to know how this podcast is resonating with you. It's not easy to find spaces that bring together our faith, our desire to walk with God, along with really good and helpful and wise insights from the field of psychology. And so your support and your help in spreading the word about this podcast is so deeply appreciated. It truly makes a difference in this world. I think this work of healing is the work that we are called to do in partnership with God's Spirit. So thank you again for being here, for writing to me, and for sharing about the podcast. I'm so thrilled to welcome Aundi Kolber back to the podcast today. Aundi is a dear friend of mine, and she's a friend of the podcast. She's appeared several times on the podcast in the past. And so if you're new to the podcast or new to Aundi's work and want to hear more, we'll link to those prior episodes with Aundi in the show notes so you can hear more from her. She's a trauma therapist, an author, and speaker, and her work has resonated with so many of us through her best-selling books, Try Softer and Strong Like Water. Today, Aundi and I are going to dive into her newest offering, Take What You Need. It's a beautifully contemplative book that invites us to pause, reflect, and care for the parts of ourselves that most need tending. Before we dive in, I want to just highlight some terms that Aundi and I use throughout today's episode. Again, in case you're new to the podcast, I don't want to assume that some of this language is familiar to you, there's a concept that underpins a lot of Aundi's work. It's called the window of tolerance. This term was coined by Dr. Dan Siegel, and it's a way of understanding how our nervous system processes stress. When we're within our window of tolerance, we tend to feel more balanced, more present, and more able to handle life's challenges. It's very similar to what Kimberly Miller and I call the spirit-led self, as we describe in our book, Boundaries for Your Soul, that place inside where we tap into the best of who we are, that's calm, that's clear, that's creative. It's not that the stressors of life go away. It's that we can access that place inside and lead ourselves through life's challenges with clarity and confidence and from a calm place inside. However, when life's pressures push us outside of that window, whether due to trauma or just overwhelm or day-to-day stress, we might swing into hyper arousal where we feel anxious or panicked or reactive, or what we call hypo arousal, which is where we feel numb or disconnected or shut down. And so the goal is to stay within that window of tolerance. And this is what Aundi's work is all about. It's about teaching us how to expand that window of tolerance so we can recenter ourselves even in life's hardest moments. And that's what makes her new book, it's called Take What You Need, so special. It's an invitation to slow down and ask what our bodies and souls truly need, whether it's rest, whether it's nourishment, whether it's courage. And as you'll hear us discuss later in the episode, this kind of compassion toward ourselves doesn't make us weak. It actually strengthens us and equips us to advocate for ourselves more effectively. You can find Aundi's new book, Take What You Need, wherever books are sold. I am thrilled to bring you my conversation with Aundi Kolber. I'm just thrilled to have this opportunity to talk about you. We talk often, but this is just a unique opportunity to really talk about your work. And, so many of my listeners are familiar with your work, have read Try Softer or Strong Like Water, but it's just a really fun opportunity for me to get to ask you about this new book and just in general about what shapes your work. So thanks for being here.
Well, it is so fun to be here, such a joy to get to share it with you. And I know we have such a shared love of so many concepts. And so I think we always have such a fun chemistry. And I always, I respect your work so much. So I'm so grateful that we get to do this.
It's pretty neat. I was just talking to Ryan, a mutual friend of ours. He shared with us about OCD, and he was saying that he met Chuck, our other mutual friend, online. And I was saying, well, that's how you and I met. And these are the gifts that social media can give us. So I'm very grateful for that.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Okay, so I want to dive in, Aundi. Really, your whole body of work, including this newest offering, is grounded in this idea of a gentle approach to healing. Try softer, right? This idea, instead of trying harder, white-knuckling it, to use your phrase, we're trying softer. Strong like water. Initially, you think about that and you're like, wait a minute. Yeah, water is strong, very strong, but it's not necessarily the first thing we think about when we think about strength. It's flexible, it's pliable, it has movement. And so tell me a little bit about how and why this gentle, compassionate approach to healing has been so important to you, and why you think it's so important for all of us.
Yeah, well, great question. I think the first thing I would say is that I definitely didn't start writing about these concepts or haven't been drawn to these concepts because I automatically have an affinity for them. And what I mean by that is to say, I love these ideas and they had become embodied in who I am. But because of my own story, my own story of childhood trauma, the complexity of that, the white knuckling, the pushing hard, there has been ways that has saved me in my life. There have been ways that that felt like it was a lot of my personality growing up. Having to just be such a hard worker, having to be so ahead of the game, having to be hyper vigilant or over accommodating others, or having to be the quote unquote strong one. All of these things What's tricky about it is it looks impressive oftentimes, right? Like in our culture, whether you're talking about wider culture or Christian culture, I mean, these ideas get a lot of praise. And a lot of that is because they get things done. You know what I mean? Like there's something about it that works. There's parts of that that works. But for me, what I learned, there came a point, really multiple points. There have been multiple points where that way of existing was burning me up. In a way, it was still effective, but my ability to just even exist was diminishing. And in so many respects, I think that followed a similar line as I was doing my therapeutic work with clients. Like I could see that clients were trying so hard, and it was like they were just stuck in the mud, right? Like when a car just gets stuck and you just spin your wheels, and gosh, you are exerting a ton of energy, but it's not getting you anywhere. That really drove me to have to consider, what if there was a different way? And I think all of my work always comes back to this idea that, yes, we want to honor all the ways we survive, but ultimately we cannot exist without at least some of that compassion, at least some of the gentleness. Like we are made for it. And I think without it, we become rigid. It breaks us in ways that are not worth it. So ultimately, I think about something like compassion and gentleness as something that really does make us pliable. It's a way that our body gets to experience safety, even in the midst of really hard things.
Yeah, you talk about, you have that basketball athletic side of you, the fierce side of you that goes hard. So to your point, this isn't necessarily this intuitive, this kind of try softer. Is it necessarily, you've gone hard out of survival, out of, God-given parts of you. Do you see it as a both and, where we need those parts of us that push and we need to know when to let up? How do you see that?
Great question. Absolutely. But the caveat, and I think to borrow, some IFS, your wheelhouse language, I think it's all dependent on, can we lead those parts? And, to come to the kind of frameworks I a lot of times use is to say, do I have at least 1 foot in my window of tolerance? Am I able to, using Dan Siegel's language, can I think about thinking? Can I be with the part, right? Am I, again, using IFS language, am I blended with the part, or am I differentiated from the part, but I'm with, right? And to me, it is a whole world of difference. It literally changes the game. Right? Because what I would say, and I know you and I have had so many conversations about parts work and all of this work. What does it look like to honor ourselves, honor our parts, and yet live in alignment too, right? And I think it's not to say that our parts themselves, I think, always know what is best for our full self. Right? But being able to turn towards those parts with compassion allows us to integrate, to work with them so that the gifts, so using my own story, basketball Aundi, that's a part of that, I call a part of myself basketball Aundi, and she is fierce, right? And I developed that part in the midst of severe trauma. And, for so many years, that part, if I would go to that part, it actually would feel scary to the rest of my system. It felt scary to feel that intensity. So I would do this like ping pong ball feeling in my body. And I didn't know how to be with it. Over time, one of the gifts has been that with that compassion, building that compassion, really building an internal relationship with that part. Now I can work with that part. And it sort of feels like I get to call that part up, right? And I'm like, okay, girl, let's do this thing. We're about to do this hard thing, and let's work together.
And you're in charge of it. You're deploying it, to use, I love that, with a foot inside your window of tolerance or from a self-led place. And I think that's so important. It's not that being soft or gentle or understanding the flexibility of strength means being weak or means not looking out for yourself. I just had a conversation with a couple about marriage, 2 therapists, and we were talking about how when you learn to do your inner work, your inner healing, and you stop trying to blame other people, it doesn't mean that you don't still at times stick up for yourself and say, hey, I'm not okay with this. But in fact, you're doing that from a place of calm. You're doing that from a place of self-leadership. I love that 1 foot within your window of tolerance. So the strength is stronger.
Absolutely. And I think this is such an important sticking point for people because this is always the thing I think people wrestle with is to say, wait, but will it actually, sort of the question I think comes down to, will it actually work? Like, what do you do when you're in an abusive situation? What do you do when you're in hard situations where the answer isn't always just to be soft in a way that absolutely, like, it's never to just to allow yourself to be harmed. But I think what's different about this kind of approach is that the compassion, often even just for ourselves, is part of what allows us to access enough safety that allows us then, using IFS language, allows us to access some self-energy. And what that's doing from a broader system perspective is it opens us up to all the resources available to us, right? Including the ability to set boundaries from a place that's not from a place of punishment, for example. It's the ability to hold the line.
Yes.
With dignity, with power, but without dehumanizing others. And I think this really is the work of compassion. And I want to say, I really appreciate Dr. Kristen Neff's work around, she talks about self-compassion through 2 lenses. Tender self-compassion, which is often of that more soft, gentle, nurturing. But then she also talks about it through the lens of fierce self-compassion, which is also considered sort of a mama bear energy. It's sort of a protective energy. Again, it's still rooted in compassion, but it's from a place that, as a mom, I think about if I see someone wanting to harm my kiddos, I'm like, oh, mama bear, not to dehumanize those people, but that's like a no, thank you.
Yes. Yes.
That's some no thank you energy. Like you may not do that. You may not pass, right? And we are deserving of that, not only for others, but also for ourselves.
That's good. There's almost more agency there when you're in command of those parts of you. Tell me about this word resilience. A lot of your work, I think this idea of strength is getting at this word resilience. It's thrown around a lot. It's foundational, I think, to this journey of healing. What do you mean by it? And what does it look like? How do we know we've kind of developed resilience or we're helping our kids to develop resilience?
I love that you brought this up because I think this is something I'm really passionate about for many years now. And I think to just be totally honest, I've had a little bit of a bone to pick, perhaps, because I have seen resilience really misused often. And what I mean by that is I've worked with many clients through the years who've been called resilient. And not that that's a bad thing, but it's often been used at a time when what they needed was support. And what they heard was, gosh, seems like you got it. You're resilient, right? Or there could be other iterations of that. So I just start there to say, it's like, I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding around resilience. And here's how I think of it. Ultimately, I think of resilience as the ability to return to some safety, to some connection to that self-energy. I think that is the pathway that allows us to ultimately be resilient. Now, I want to just give a couple caveats because I always have to. It's not to say that sometimes we have to push through. Sometimes, I talk about in Strong Like Water, like situational strength. Sometimes we just do the best we can. And that gets called resilience, like full stop. And my concern with that is that basically we're telling people, hey, go get traumatized. Don't think about anything else. And that's resilience. And my hope is to say, look, yes, there are times when we just do what we have to do. And it is worth all that we can give, all that we can offer to experience as much resources and safety as we go through something hard, because that will ultimately allow us to move through it with less harm.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction. I hear you saying the resilience is not in the survival. That may be a part of it, which you lay out so beautifully and Strong Like Water. Sometimes we do go back into survival mode, and there's no shame in that. The resilience is in our ability to come back to safety. Is that right?
That's what I would say, is that the ability, there's a great quote from Sharon Salzberg, who is a mindfulness teacher, and she says, the healing is in the return. And what I would say is that in many ways, if I could borrow her words, I would say the resilience is in the return. And sometimes it's not that we return all the ways. It's not that everything's perfect or figured out. It's that when we can even get a tiny little toe in that window of tolerance, we begin to have access to the parts of our system. Because when we think about it neurobiologically, if we're only living from survival brain, what that means is there is no pathway to metabolizing the hard we're currently experiencing. So the only thing that can happen in the absence of safety is for trauma to develop. And so because that's the truth, it's not to say that we can't honor the way we get through. And it's not to say that the way we get through can't even be reclaimed, right? As we go back and do healing work. But I think when we only classify resilience through the lens of pushing yourself as hard as you can, no matter what, we really set people up for harm. And I don't think that is true to what resilience is ultimately really about.
As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about parenting. You're a mom. We've talked about this, but sometimes that's a very helpful metaphor for this reparenting we're trying to do for ourselves. So if your child experiences something incredibly painful at school, we don't say to our child, well, some people probably did have this said to them, that'll toughen you up. That's how you toughen up, right? Versus helping our children develop resilience would be honoring the thing that happened that was hard, honoring what they had to do to get through it, and helping them through that connection to us have that full ability to cry, to feel the pain, to feel the anger, to experience safety, which then equips our child to go back to school the next day and know how to advocate for themselves or know how to find a different friend group or whatever the thing is. I'm pulling that example out of my mind because I think this is what, if we didn't have that experience as children, what we're trying to do on this journey as adults, right, is teach ourselves how to use your word, that flow of strength, to find that safety where we're honoring all the pieces, which then does equip us to potentially have the agency to do the things we need to do to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. No, I think that's so well said. And I think part of it is the difference. I sometimes think of it, it's a little bit of, I don't want to reduce this down too much, but I think to kind of make it a little bit more simple or accessible, what I would say is when you have pain plus a lack of support and resources, the likelihood of trauma is high. If you have pain or adversity plus connection and resources and support, the likelihood of resilience is high. I mean, really, that's how I think of the difference, right? So I often say pain does not automatically mean it will become trauma. It does not. And that to me is so hopeful, right? Because we don't have to be fatalistic and say, sorry, that's it. That's the end of the road, right? Instead, and this is again where this try softer sort of posture is infused in all the work that I do, which is to say the harder it is, the more gentle we must become, right? Because it is in that place of connection and safety, support, however that needs to be expressed to the need that we are experiencing, that as we are met in that, and sometimes we can do that inner work, reparenting, if that's with our kiddo, absolutely, because we are probably one of the best resources our kids have available to them. We act as sort of, I think this is Alan Shore's work, a psychoneurobiological regulator. I might be getting that wrong, but essentially we are part of what helps them regulate their bodies. So when we are regulated, they can tap into that. And that allows them to experience this hardship through the lens of enough, right? Having enough, being seen more than enough. There's a place of abundance rather than lack.
This is hard and I have what I need. Both of those things can be true That's so good. That's so powerful. This idea of resourcing leads us right to this new book you have coming out. It's a little bit different than some of the other books you've written. And I think it's toward this end of resourcing. It's called Take What You Need. Tell us a little bit about what led you to want to create this offering and what's unique about it. Do you ever feel frustrated with bloating or bathroom struggles that you just can't seem to get a handle on? Whether it's feeling weighed down before a big event or those moments when your digestion just refuses to cooperate, it's hard to feel your best when your gut is out of balance. I have been there, and that's why I am so excited to tell you about DS-01 Daily Symbiotic from Seed. I first heard about Seed when a friend recommended it for gut health, and honestly, it has been a game changer. DS-01 is so much more than just a probiotic. It's packed with 24 clinically and scientifically studied strains that support not only gut health, but also your skin, heart, immune system, and more, all in just 2 easy capsules a day. And honestly, let me just tell you, it really works. I noticed a difference in my bloating within the first 2 weeks, and I just feel lighter and better overall. Even after meals that used to leave me feeling stuffed and bloated and just weighed down, DS-01 helps me feel more comfortable and balanced. Plus, it's easy to make it part of my daily routine. I just take it every morning before breakfast, and it's as simple as that. Get ahead of the new year with a routine that helps you now by going to seed.com/bestofyou and use code 25bestofyou to get 25% off your first month. That's 25% off your first month of Seed's DS-01 Daily Symbiotic at seed.com/bestofyou. Code 25bestofyou. Who doesn't love a little luxury every once in a while? I know I do, but let's face it, luxury doesn't always fit within the budget until I discovered Quince. Quince is my go-to for affordable luxury essentials, and let me tell you, they deliver. Just last week, I snagged their 100% washable silk skirt for under $60. Yes, under $60, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's elegant, it's versatile, it's comfortable. I've paired it with heels for a night out. I've paired it with sneakers for a more casual look, and every time it feels like I'm wearing something straight off the runway. Quince offers everything from Mongolian cashmere sweaters starting at $50 to washable silk tops and dresses to 14-karat gold jewelry, all at prices 50 to 80% less than similar brands. How do they do this? They cut out the middleman and they work directly with top factories. Plus, they're committed to ethical, responsible manufacturing. Give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/bestofyou for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/bestofyou to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/bestofyou.
Well, I'm really excited about this particular book. It is a little bit different than my other books. And part of that is because I've drawn on a lot of my previous writing, like Try Softer and Strong Like Water, and kind of worked with my editor to look at quotes that people have really resonated with through the years. Like what has stood out to people, what has, been meaningful. And as I've thought about that, one of the things that I hear a lot from people, every time I go speak publicly, it happens on my email, my DMs, everywhere I go, people will say to me, I love your work so much. They'll say this has been really meaningful. But I would say about 40% of people will say to me, it took me a while before I could even start your book because I was so overwhelmed when I first heard about it that I didn't even feel like I could begin. And so this particular book, and a lot of times even when I post on places like Instagram or even on my email, I think about those people who are, they are so outside their window of tolerance, or maybe they've got their pinky toe in their window of tolerance. They're just barely, they got a little fingernail, they are holding on, right? And I get it because I've been there. And sometimes it's hard to metabolize a lot of information. And so what I tried to do with this book, and Tyndale, my publisher, has been wonderful, and my editor was really open to this different idea, is to set up this book and sort of think about these different categories of where people might be in their story. Things like, take what you need when exhaustion looms large, like when you need to know God is with you, when you need a strength that is soft, like all these different, there's probably like 20 categories. And we took these quotes and tried to sort of discern, where do these fit? And then the encouragement to the reader, and the way I've sort of tried to design it and set it up, is to be very like picture image forward, like beautiful, greenery and just very gentle contemplative imagery, and to invite people to actually check in with themselves and to say, what is it? That phrase I've been using for many years now. Like, if you were to take what you need, what would your body say that you needed? If you were able to just settle your breath and your system and your spirit and your body, and you asked, what is it you would need? It's sort of like this book is designed to say, I want to help you strengthen that muscle that allows you to tune in so that you might participate with God in offering to the parts of yourself who are hurting, who are exhausted, who are feeling alone, who are depleted. Here is some hope.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're naming that. I think it's really true. I can remember in my own life feeling overwhelmed by what can feel like a Pandora's box of pain. I've been at seasons of my life. I remember an early experience with a therapist where she was actually very astute in hindsight, but in that first session, she just put her name on a couple of pain points in my life, and I never went back. I was like, wow. And in hindsight, she was right on, but it was too much. And so I love what you're saying with this book. You're trying to empower the reader to use a phrase I hear you use a lot, to honor the pace of their own bodies, to say, I think I need this today, versus kind of feeling like they have to open up that whole Pandora's box of all the different things that they could take or do.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. And I think it's actually a really common experience for people, right? I've had that experience too, where, right, like the right thing at the wrong time is not the right thing. And that's why I even tell people when they I'll meet people and they're like, I'm going to read your book. And I would say like 80% of the time I say, hey, take it at your own pace. I say that a lot because it's not that I don't want people to read my book. I would love for you to read my book. And I believe in the work I've done, but I want to make this work. And I know you are passionate about this too, like accessible. How do we take it out of the ivory towers of academia? How do we take it out of even our therapist's office, which I think is wonderful. I love that people are getting to therapy. I love that it's discussed on all these levels. But I have always wondered, how do we get these resources to the people who actually need it the most? Because sometimes the people who are the most well-resourced, sometimes you have a little more capacity maybe to read something. And that's not bad. Thank goodness that there is, all of these things that are true, that there can be folks who are more resourced. And my hope for this one is it's that kind of book that whether it's for you or whether like you're thinking of someone in your life and they're going through a heck of a season, that you could say, hey, here's something just to consider.
Yeah, I could see it working in one of two ways. I could see it working, I love that, on the front end where someone maybe doesn't even realize. Maybe as a friend, you're aware, I think they're going to need to do some of this work, but I don't really want to buy them a book, that's overtly saying you have trauma or, you need to work through this. I could see it working on the front end, either for yourself or someone else, where it's like, here's a simple way in. I think the subtitle is Soft Words for Hard Days.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
I love that. I could also see it, Aundi, for folks who have worked through your other books. It's also the ongoing work that we're doing, even when we have kind of gone into the Pandora's box and we have looked at it all and maybe pushed on some of the bruises. And for the most part, that resilience, we can tap into that. We still have hard days where we need to give ourselves the gift of those soft words. So I could see it kind of working in a lot of different ways.
I love that. And I think too, it's my hope. I've kind of been calling it a contemplative coffee table book.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah. But however you want to take that. But because to me, sometimes, and I'm a really deep thinker. I tend to, I could think about 12 layers for just one little idea, right? And I know you and I are similar in this, thinking about it from so many different angles. And sometimes partly because, I'm a highly sensitive person. I do have a history of trauma, like all these things. What I need is not more, I need less. And so, oftentimes having something that's smaller allows us to take that sort of bite size, like here's just something, and see how it lands and see where it meets you, see if it could be a resource to you, see the ways that this might help. You and I were talking about this resilience conversation, right? I'm so passionate about, because the pain is not going anywhere, right? Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world, which what a beautiful promise. So here's what we know. The pain in this world is not going to magically go away. Right? And certainly we want to work towards things like justice, and we want to work towards all the things. That's not that we want to cause pain on purpose. But I love considering, what are all the ways for that second part of the equation? What does it look like to participate with God in meeting the needs that are present in that other part of the equation?
I love that. Yeah. That kind of leads into, we've talked a lot about this. We've talked a little bit on the podcast, but I'd love to for you to share with us, how do you talk about a contemplative coffee table book, right? How do our spiritual practices and our faith practices work into this kind of take what you need approach to mental health? So for example, I think about this book that you've beautifully put together and written. Reminds me a little bit, I remember as a teenager, someone gave me one of those books of Bible promises where you can look up the thing you're struggling with and find the scriptures that kind of address that. And I always thought that was kind of a cool categorization of, I'm angry. Okay, here's, 10 things that might meet you at that point. I almost sense that there's that kind of energy with this offering.
At LinkedIn, we know hiring is a big deal for your small business. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. LinkedIn uses data that you can't find anywhere else to give you the best candidates, all so you can feel confident you're hiring the best person for the job. And even a little hiring bliss. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
So how would that dovetail with your spiritual practices? How does this work dovetail with that?
Yeah, what a important piece of this. And I think, when I think about it, I want to step back just a little bit to say, one of the things I write in the introduction of this book is to say, I think of healing in many ways like God's hospitality to us. I think the table is a really important metaphor. It's personally really meaningful to me when I think about healing, that there's just this abundance, and God invites us to come, right? We can come and we get to partake. Also in Psalm 23, he sets a table for me in the presence of my enemies. There's these imagery of God setting tables for us in the wilderness. There's these important themes. And I think of healing as hospitality, God's hospitality, in many ways, hospitality to ourselves. And so when I think about this, in many ways, I think trauma has been the opposite, right? And that's an understatement of that. To say that where there has been need, there has been lack, or there has actually been pain or overt harm or abuse. Oftentimes that's taken away our voice or our choice. It has taken away oftentimes the ability, it has cut us off from the God-given wisdom that God placed in our bodies. And so to me, this concept of take what you need is really meaningful to me in so many respects, because I see it as a repair. I see it as the repairing, that as we participate with God, with God's Spirit, to say, no, you do not have to sit here and pretend that you're a robot. I promise to be with you. My Spirit is with you. I gave you wisdom in your body. Like that is our birthright. God gave that to us. And so when I think about this through the lens of like spiritual disciplines and all that, what it makes me think of is as we restore and re-empower folks to, and this, I mean this not just on a spiritual level, but also on a very visceral level, that interoception, which often gets cut off when we go through trauma, it starts to restore. And it actually allows us to take this holistic posture that allows us to say, in participation with God's Spirit, God, what do I need? And so often, right, we can take it out of sacred secular and it can become, okay, like maybe this breakfast is holy right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like literally, like maybe receiving the beauty outside
is what I need.
Is what I need, and God's goodness to me. And I think that also includes things like scripture. That includes things that we're supplementing, things like the Book of Common Prayer or, whatever that we're doing. We get to ask, is this in alignment? Does this honor? Is this in participation with? And certainly, I mean, there's tons of caveats that I could say. Yes, there are times when it's okay to we certainly need to be uncomfortable sometimes. It's not that that's bad. And I'm not saying that we don't do things at times through a lens of even sacrificial postures. And I know this is something that you are so passionate about talking about too, like these untangling of saying like, but this is different, because we need to make sure in order to heal, we have to be able to actually connect to the truth of our experience. And I think that these things have a very significant intersection.
Listening to you, it gets back to that idea of agency, which is what's taken from us when we've been hurt. It's, I have a choice here. And God gives us that. He gives us that. He empowers us. Imagine that table as you're describing it, that smorgasbord of items to learn ourselves even. Maybe this is what will help. Maybe this is what will help. Ooh, that was too much. Oh, that wasn't quite enough. That's that take what you need idea is so empowering because it's restoring our sense of selfhood or our sense of agency in partnership with God to discern. And that's so empowering. This is what actually helps me. And this doesn't. And now I know. And that's wisdom that I can now take with me going forward. So I love that this book, in a way, is both a resource and just in the very way it's set out, an invitation for people to do that inner work of what do I need in this moment? I love that.
Yeah, no, I think that's so well said. And I love how these ideas, I geek out, at the way these ideas tend to intersect. And I think that's the thing about truth, is that it cannot help but reveal itself and there's just a beauty in recognizing how much these things sort of build on each other.
Yeah, I love that. All right, Aundi, I want to ask you before we end. Well, first of all, tell us where folks can find the book, how they can find your work, all the things like that.
Well, Take What You Need is available wherever books are sold. So I'd love folks to go to their favorite bookseller. And, that would be so meaningful to me. And I hope it will be a resource for everyone who orders. And you can find me on Instagram at Aundi Kolber. And you can also find me at my website, aundikolber.com. I have lots of resources there. So feel free to sign up for my newsletter as well.
I love, sometimes you'll post the phrase, take what you need. And I think in the sphere of social media and influencers, sometimes I get overwhelmed. Talk about an overwhelming smorgasbord of options, right? Of people just, telling you different tropes or cliches or memes. And sometimes they're good, but it's like, which one of these should I apply? And I notice that you will often, when you post something, say, take what you need. And again, it's that invitation of, I'm going to offer something and take what you need. It's that invitation to agency that I think is so beautiful. So I love that about your online presence. I think that is such a breath of fresh air. Again, in a place where there's a lot of expert voices, there's a lot of people telling you this is what you should do. It's just such a powerful phrase. Take what you need. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And yeah, I just appreciate you. And I feel like, yeah, it's one of those things of trying to figure out how do we do this work? And I know you and I are always talking about how do we innovate in a way that really honors the people that we are writing for so that that it's not just about likes. It's not just about those things, but it would truly support folks and that they would feel the agency, even if it means that it's not supportive to them. To say, okay, I'm going to pass this time. Like, God bless that. I love that.
Exactly. That would, to me, feel like a win. If someone said, this is actually not helpful to me today, because that's what we need so much, is that kind of discernment. And again, that sense of agency within ourselves where we can find that safety within ourselves to go, no, that's not helpful, or ooh, that is. So that's a good note for folks listening to look for that kind of energy and that kind of approach in the people that you look to and in the people that you follow and in the ways we're showing up in the world. It kind of gets back to that gentleness that we started with, that gentle approach. Aundi, what is bringing out the best of you right now?
I think the thing that feels most present in my life, we were able to go to California. I had a speaking event, and then my family was able to come with me, and we were able to go to Disney. It was just a really special trip, and it reminded me of the resource of play. And I can be a little bit of a serious person. Like, I feel deeply and I have lots of compassion and all those things. But play doesn't always, it's not an automatic thing. But when I can connect to it, gosh, it opens me up so much. And so that is really bringing out, I think, the best of me right now.
I love that. I love when you post the photos of your whole family with the Mickey Mouse ears, because you're talking about serious topics. You're a very deep person. And I just love when I see those, because I know that's a beautiful way that again, it's that both and, that you're being gentle with yourself. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdom with us and just for putting out so much goodness into the world. I just so appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of The Best of You. It would mean so much if you take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts and click the plus or follow button. That will ensure you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave your 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday. And remember, as you become the best of who you are, you honor God, you heal others, and you stay true to your God-given self.